What I'd like to do is move through 6 questions, sort of to give this a shape. And at the end of the 6 questions, as I mentioned, I'll talk us through a practice. The first of these questions is, why do we need to talk about embodiment? Why does it matter? And I think it's really important. I think we underestimate the extent to which we have disembodied as a culture and the effect of that disembodiment. Understand, just to begin with, disembodiment is a form of forgetfulness. And it seems to me that we are a culture that is sort of devoted to forgetfulness. We forget our relationships with each other, our relationships with the life of this planet on which we depend. And to me, that comes back largely to our disembodiment. So the primary relationship in our personal lives is the relationship with our bodies. I don't know of anything more primary than your relationship with your own body. Now, we live in a culture that for thousands of years has devoted itself to a state of disembodiment in which we live in the head. And why do I say thousands of years? If you look at a dialogue called Timaeus by Plato, there's a very wise man in this dialogue, and this wise man, Timaeus, is asked, how did the gods fashion us? And boy, his answer is fascinating. What he replied was, first, the gods made this divine sphere based on the orbs of the heavens. And then they realized this divine sphere wouldn't be able to get around, so they grew it a vehicle, arms and legs and a trunk. So here we are, 350 BC, and the body is being described as the vehicle by which the divinest part of us, the head, can move around. So this subject of disembodiment, it's not a product of our technological society. It goes back to Plato, and presumably earlier than that, because he was putting into language something that people recognized in themselves and affirmed, as the dialogue makes clear. So we, the challenge we face in coming back to the bodies is a challenge of changing our neurology that has been shaped by this culture that says the head is almighty, the head should be in charge. If you're in trouble, go to the head and sort it out. And how then to come back to the body that we might come to rest in the body. You can't rest in the head. It is not a place of rest. You can rest in the body, because by resting in the body, you come to rest on the earth. You come to rest in the present. And you come to rest in the relationships of life that uphold you in the present moment. So that's, if we are going to change our relationship with the earth, we need a new way of being. And to come back to the body, to no longer, as long as you are overriding the body and dominating it and seeing it as a machine to be supervised, you will carry that same set of assumptions, those same relationships to the world around you. And it is impossible to harmonize with the world if you are not in a state of wholeness, because harmony is a product of wholeness. So to come back to the body is to undo the primary forgetfulness of our culture and remember the world around us and the relationships that hold us. So to me, that's why we need to talk about embodiment and remember who we are. And that, of course, that brings up the question, what is embodiment? So I put into the chat my definition. I'm not saying there's not room for improvement, but it's a beginning. Embodiment is a state in which the whole of your intelligence comes into coherence with the present. So there are a few things to unpack within that. What do I mean by the whole of your intelligence? Well, it's been established that the body processes over 1 billion times more information than we can be consciously aware of. In other words, we are aware of 1/billionth of the information that is being processed by the body. There is such a resource for coming into harmony, for locating yourself, for responding with the whole of your being. And to be embodied is to embrace the whole of that resource. And just to be clear, the thinking of the body is different from the thinking we're used to in the head. We tend to think with words in the head or numbers, symbols. It's a realm of abstract thinking. The thinking of the body is sensational. Like literally, it thinks through sensation. So that journey through which you join that deep reservoir of intelligence within the body is a journey that doesn't take you into objective knowing. It takes you into subtle feeling. You drop into the body and you feel the present. You feel what is being asked of you. You feel what your next step should be. And so it's important to recognize the thinking of the body is sensational. There's a Latin word, sentire. It's a verb that translates into English in two ways. It means to think. It also means to feel. They were the same thing. And so at this point, our word sense comes from sentire. And you can say you're not making sense, in which case you're telling somebody their thoughts are muddled. Or you can say, I sense something's wrong, which means I feel something's wrong. So both of those senses are preserved in our language, but we've compartmentalized them. So in our journey to disembodiment, we have severed our thinking from our being. We think with the head, and then there is the body that feels. When embodiment, this state in which the whole of your intelligence comes into coherence with the present, what happens in that state of wholeness is that every sensation in the body is recognized as a form of thinking. And every thought is felt. So even as I'm speaking to you now, I am feeling every thought. It's this sense that my thoughts bubble up from within the body and condense into language that floats up. And as it condenses, it's like condensing within this echo chamber of the body that brings clarity to it. And I can speak in the way I was trained to speak. If I shut down the body, I could say a whole lot of really interesting things and absolutely fascinate you with all that I have to share. But there is no being behind those words I'm speaking. And you can hear that. When thought is felt and sensation is recognized as thought, there is a clarity to your being that only embodiment can bring. So this sense that embodiment is a state in which the whole of your intelligence comes into coherence with the present. Let's look at our understanding currently of what embodiment is. Embodiment is often described as listening to the body. So let me just be clear. If you are listening to the body, you are sitting up in your head, turning your attention down and noticing what's happening below the neck. To think listening to the body as embodiment, when you examine it, the metaphor is saying that your body is in the room next door. And the best you can do is to put your ear to the wall and listen to what's happening over there. But your body is not in the room next door. Your being is you. Your breath is you. Your breath isn't something you notice that is happening the way you might notice clouds passing in the sky. Your breath is you in this moment, sensationally you. And so, because we live in the head, because we tend to disconnect from the body, we are in a paradigm of thinking that isn't a decade old, isn't 100 years old, is 2,000, more than 2,000 years old. So to find other ways of understanding what embodiment is, we almost need to look at other cultures and how they experience the body and how they speak of that. One of my favorite cultures is a culture in Africa, the Anglo-Ewe. And they have this term for the senses. I mean, we have 5 senses. And they're like mainly about the head. The Anglo-Ewe have 9 senses. And it's all about the body. In fact, their word for sense, the closest word they have for sense, is sesilalame, which translates literally as feel at flesh inside. So what that means in practical terms is that when they are listening, they are feeling the sounds of the world through their bodies. When they are seeing, they are feeling the sights of the world through their bodies. And they have a word that means to listen with the ear. So they're aware of what that experience is, but that's not real listening. And what a contrast to our own culture, where we only have 5 senses, and those 5 senses all follow the model of a stimulus from the outside passing the boundary of the self and landing on a receptor to be interpreted by the brain. So that boundary of the self is something that living in the head insists on. You move into the head and suddenly you are protected and enclosed from the world. Now, there is a strength to being able to step back from the world. You gain perspective by stepping back from the world. But if you live in that place of separation, you will feel alienated and separate from the world and anxious. It's not home. Home is the body. Home is being at rest on the earth. And, when I say the whole of your intelligence comes into coherence with the present, let's just look at what intelligence is just for a sec. Because again, our headist culture has defined intelligence in a way that is very flattering to that abstract-oriented intelligence in the head. So its definition of intelligence is the ability to reason in an abstract fashion. And that's what an IQ tests for. An IQ test determines that ability within you and gives you a number and says, here, this is your intelligence, 118.5. So, yes, the ability to reason abstractly, that is a form of intelligence. But to me, it's a narrow bandwidth on a massive spectrum. And when I look at that spectrum and I seek to characterize it, the first word I go for is sensitivity. Sensitivity. Any sensitivity for me is a form of intelligence. A sensitivity to a child's tears, a sensitivity to birdsong, to arithmetic relationship, to legal argument. There are countless sensitivities, and each one of them is a form of intelligence. The problem, in a way, with a sensitivity by itself is that a sensitivity is necessarily reactive. I mean, if your retina didn't react to light, you wouldn't see. And we know that reactivity because there are some people we say, oh, he's too sensitive or she's too sensitive. Well, that sensitivity, that primary intelligence within us needs to be grounded in order to become coherent. And so for me, if I am to characterize what is our intelligence, it is the state of grounded sensitivity. It attunes to wholeness. It attunes to the world. And sensitivity is demeaned within our culture in many ways. We have demeaned the bedrock of our intelligence. So to me, embodiment is not about listening to the body. It's about listening to the world through the body. The body is a resonator. The body is like a singing bowl. And you never step out of wholeness. You can't lose wholeness. I mean, wholeness is all there is. It's just the nature of our reality. But what happens is we desensitize ourselves to wholeness. We harbor microtensions in the flesh. We brace against the present. We enclose ourselves within our skin and feel alone in the world. And that journey to embodiment is about resensitizing the body once again, that it might resonate like a singing bowl to the present. We're very, very clever as a culture. I don't think there's any doubt. We are the cleverest culture that has ever walked the face of the earth. But we have forgotten how to live intelligently. We are despoiling the very web of life on which we depend. So to come back to the body is the first step in learning once again how to live intelligently. So we've been through two of my questions. Why do we need to talk about embodiment? What is embodiment? Why does embodiment matter? We've covered some of that, but let me bring another perspective to it. If you are disembodied, that means you have disconnected from your being and moved up into the head. And if that's the case, you live with an emptiness inside that needs filling. And so you are driven by impulse, you're driven by reactivity. And we are an addictive society. And, as I see it, our addictions are attempts to fill what cannot be filled. That emptiness that is the absence of our being or the absence of our sensitivity to being. And we are restless. There's a great story. Carl Jung came to America and visited a Pueblo community and was sitting with an elder there, and they were chatting. And at a certain point, the elder said to Jung, we we think the white man is insane. And Jung said, oh, what is it about us that makes you say that? And the elder observed, you are always restless, always grasping, always needing more, never at rest. And Jung admitted that was so and asked the elder, what is it about us that you think creates that restlessness? And the elder said, well, you say that you think with your heads. And Jung said, yes. Where do you think with? And the elder pointed to his heart and said, we think here. And it was like a revelation for Jung. You can think with your heart. I mean, of course you can. Jung was all about that. But this paradigm of the head is in charge, the head is where we think, had overridden his awareness of that other possibility. So to be disembodied is to live in a state of restlessness. And embodiment matters because you come back to the whole of your intelligence. You live with a calmness, the calmness of being held by the present as opposed to feeling alone. And your life has a clarity, your purpose has a clarity. And let me talk about that for a second. You know, Joseph Campbell, whom I love and wrote extensively about the world's myths, talked about the way the world calls to us. And I think each of us is gifted with a unique set of sensitivities and gifts to be put into service. And it's in the summoning of those gifts that we find our deepest purpose. But it is through the body that we feel the world whispering to us to do that, activating us, calling us forward. And you know, the world, you feel the world's calling and you answer it. It doesn't mean you're going to be successful, but it does mean you're living in your purpose. And without the body, you lose that. And then we defer to external values like money or prestige or whatever it might be, which are no substitute for that clear keel of purpose that carries you forward. Another reason embodiment matters is we're brought up with a story that we are basically alone in the world. You're born alone, you die alone. And we contract ourselves into the skin and feel our aloneness. And you think of all the major ills that trouble our lives: anxiety, depression, a sense of hopelessness, a sense of insignificance, suicidal thoughts. What characterizes all of those states is that you feel alone. And that sense of being alone is bolstered at every opportunity by our culture. The fact is, in an embodied state, there is no aloneness. There is just companionship. What the body most deeply understands is that it belongs to the world. You stand before a tree and you feel its presence, and your body understands that it belongs to the tree, even as the tree belongs to it. You share this moment, this existence, in companionship, in belonging to each other. And to exile yourself from the body's intelligence is to exile yourself into a state of aloneness that is a fantasy. There is no aloneness. Everything in the universe feels your presence. I mean, when you lift your arm, the universe feels it. When you release your body to a breath, the universe feels it. When you have a thought, the universe feels it. These are ripples that move out and affect everything, even as everything ripples through and affects you. In embodiment, there is only companionship. And the last reason I'd like to touch on, in terms of why does embodiment matter, is that when you are not embodied, you are in a state of division. That means one part of you is pitted against the other part, just as Plato's divine sphere was pitted against the vehicle of the body, telling it what to do, ordering it around. When you are in that state of division, you are in self-conflict all the time. And that self-conflict is exhausting. I mean, it is simply exhausting. We wear ourselves out through this attrition of bullying ourselves and being willful and fretting about our decisions and all this wave of hyperactivity in the head that cannot come to rest in the present. So we live a disjointed, fragmented, fractured, fretful life. And you come back to the body, and you come back to the breath, and you come back to the present, and you are held, and there is a calmness on which you can come to rest. The other reason that embodiment matters, for me, is that larger significance. I look around what is happening in the world and I see the effect of disembodiment, the effect of separation, the effect of this myth that there is such a thing as independence. If I were the emperor of the world, I'm not lobbying for your vote, just saying, if I were the emperor of the world, I would ban the use of the word independence or independent, because there is no such thing. It doesn't refer to anything real. You can't find in all the cosmos one example of independence. Everything affects everything else. Everything leans on and depends on everything else. It's just a fantasy. So to chase that fantasy is to commit your life to something that is not real. And, to go to Joseph Campbell again, he described the tyrant of world mythology as the man of self-achieved independence. And you think of that phrase, and you think, isn't that the American dream? Self-achieved independence, that you make your $1 billion or $5 billion, you have your palatial compound with everything taken care of for you, and your handlers, and they do your laundry and your dishes and make your meals, and you are independent from any concerns of engaging with the world responsibly. And that's held up as the sort of ideal towards which we should strive. And you can feel that tugging at you, that need to have more, that need to be more important, that need to be sheltered from your community, from the life around you. And you could offer me a castle in France, and I wouldn't be induced for the moment to move from my little house in my little community into that splendid isolation. And that, again, that dream of independence is a consequence of disembodiment, and to come back to the relationships that hold us and to feel them and come into harmony with them is, for me, impossible without that journey that takes you back to the body. So that's why embodiment matters to me. I'd like to speak briefly about the characteristics of disembodiment. If you are thinking with your head, rather than feeling the thoughts through the whole of your body, then your thinking and your being have been sundered. And to me, that is the primary wound in our culture. That separation of our thinking from our being. And how to learn to think with the whole of your being, because every cell in your body participates in your thinking. And to open to that and be modulated by that, and to gain the perspective and holistic grounding for any thought that might come is irreplaceable. So if you feel your thinking and your being as separate things, time to come back to the breath, time to come back to the body, just to recognize that for yourself. Another characteristic of disembodiment, just because I think it helps to name these things, is self-consciousness. If in the state of self-consciousness, you're literally conscious of the self, and you tend to be sitting in your head trying to regulate the self, the way a puppeteer might regulate and move a puppet. We are mired in self-consciousness in our culture. We live in the division of narrating our own lives and second-guessing our thoughts and arranging ourselves to present well to the world. And when you are embodied, there is no self-consciousness, because there is no self in the head that is separate from the body to be conscious of it and taking charge of it. There is this unity of being that is not enclosed from the world, but is guided by, is carried forward by the world around you. So there's a huge movement that I'm aware of that is, teaching people to self-regulate. And to an extent, that's possible. You can check your breath and release, and you can be aware of your dissociation of the body. But the answer to noticing those things is always a surrender. It's not a matter of organizing it in the right way. My body isn't released to my breath, and then you surrender. The body releases to the breath. My body isn't surrendered to the present. It's held in a network of tensions, and you surrender, and you release the body to the present. Ultimately, I think there is no such thing as self-regulation. I think we are regulated by the present. And all those qualities that we yearn for, qualities of peace, harmony, sensitivity, mindfulness, all of these qualities belong to the present. Grace. I mean, we think of a dancer's grace as something that the dancer self achieves. No, the grace of a dancer's arm moving is a surrender to the present. It is being moved by the present, and through that gesture, we all feel this present moment exquisitely, because she has surrendered to the grace of being moved by the present. So we are regulated by the present. And to obsess over self-regulation is to diminish your ability to feel the present and initiate the surrender that will lead you to be guided by it. So those are characteristics of disembodiment. Characteristics of embodiment. How does it feel? What are the characteristics? And I think the characteristics of embodiment are those of being itself. And I'm aware of 5 primary characteristics of being. And what we've done as a culture is we've devoted ourselves to doing and contracted from being. So to dilate once again into your being, it helps to notice what are the characteristics of being. And being is spacious. I mean, you can look into the hardest object around you, and at a subatomic level, it's mostly empty space. It's more than 99% empty space. And we lose that spaciousness within ourselves as we become congested and constricted and pushing ourselves through life. And that is a diminution of our sense of our own being. The more spaciousness you feel, the more you dilate into your being. So spaciousness is one, fluidity is another. Everything is fluid. When you sit in the head and you look at the world around you, you see objects. Everything is an object. But there's no such thing as a fixed object. You are surrounded by processes. Everything is in process. Everything is changing. And, the tea in my cup is changing more quickly than the molecules in my pen. But it's all in flow. Being is in flow, and you cannot arrest that flow. The only way you could arrest it is to take something to absolute zero, and try though they might, physicists haven't been able to do that. Being remains fluid. Another characteristic of being as we know it is that it's grounded. It is held within the earth's embrace. It is held within the field. It has a relationship. I mean, we've had a relationship with the earth since the moment of conception. We've been held by it. And all of life on earth is in relationship to the earth. And as far as we're concerned, our legs are treated like prosthetics, just as Plato prescribed. They perambulate us around. The legs are teeming with intelligence, and to drop down and connect with that intelligence is to renew your relationship with the earth, that you might come to rest more easily on it and be nourished by its tender energies. Another characteristic of being is that it's centered. I mean, the earth has a center, the solar system has a center, the galaxy has a black hole at its center, and you have a center. And what's happened in our culture is that center is moved out of the body and into the head, and we are off balance and disconnected from our being. To come back to your center is to come back to that place of rest on the earth in the present. The last of these qualities of being, which is also for me a quality of embodiment, is that being is attuned. Everything around me is held within the field and attuned to everything else. There is nothing that stands apart from the influence of all that is. And the ancient cultures of our world knew how to attune to the present. Their very survival as hunter-gatherers depended on that attunement. They could feel the presence of animals in the forest. They could attune to the tides and currents in the ocean. This isn't conscious thinking. This is something else. And to be disembodied is to think your way forward and to believe that that's the only avenue available to you. And in fact, you can feel your way forward. As you come to rest in the present and attune to it, you will be guided by it. So the last question that I'd like to cover is simply, what are the stages of embodiment? And for me, there are two stages of embodiment, and they're very simple. The first is to awaken the sensitivities of the body. We shut down the legs, we shut down the pelvic bowl, we numb ourselves as we retreat further and further into the head. So how to breathe feeling back into the body, how to open to those held tensions and traumas gently, that we might recover the body's sensitivity so that we can once again feel what the flesh feels. The next stage of embodiment, once the body has been recovered in that way, once it's come back into wholeness, is to dilate that sensitivity into the world. Embodiment, ultimately for me, is a state of emptiness. And what I mean by that is, I spoke of the body as a resonator, like a singing bowl. Well, you stuff a singing bowl full of sand and it won't sing. Similarly with the body, when the body is filled with agendas, intentions, and things to do, you don't even feel the present. As you empty the body, there is now room within you for all the world to be felt. And your relationship with the present, I don't know, it's like the relationship to a loved one. It is a relationship through which you are known more intimately than you could ever know yourself. And to me, that is true embodiment. And there's just to put another perspective on that. There's a guy, Ilarion Merkuliev, who wrote this book, Wisdom Keeper, and I'd like to read you just a little passage in it. Our people's navigational abilities were unparalleled in North America. Because the Bering Sea has an average of 20 days of sunshine a year, due to the Japan current meeting with the cold air of Siberia, creating clouds and fog, our people could navigate without stars, a feat that requires tuning into and merging with the spirit that lives in all things. The real human being is able to navigate by feeling the energy of the sea and the land, watching the direction of swells in the sea and the kinds of birds and seals that come through the fog, knowing the direction of tidal movements, feeling the rhythm of the water, listening to animals on the rookeries and cliffs. All of this was done without thought of any kind. Doing things without thought may be a difficult concept for Western-trained minds to understand, since the mind is perceived as the center of intelligence, whereas indigenous people know that true intelligence comes as a result of suspending thought. And that is that state of emptiness and attunement that I understand as full embodiment.